What's happening, YouTube? It's Simon 466 Cards, and today we're going to debrief the Toronto Sport Card Expo. What I saw, what I heard, and talking to dealers. I was there all day Friday and at the Friday trade night. So let's jump into it. So, like I said, I was there Friday night. I was also at Jeremy Lee's networking event Thursday night, although I spent more time watching the Sixers game than anything else. But from my vantage point from the show floor on Friday, it actually seemed less busy than previous Friday shows. Definitely the one from November was busy on Friday. But the amount of people you see on the floor doesn't necessarily mean that is the same as the amount of business that dealers are doing. So I happen to know a few dealers on the show floor. So I talked to them, and they definitely were saying something different than what I was seeing with my own eyes. And that's why it's important to talk to people there. One dealer who I know quite well, he said that on Thursday he sold twice the amount that he normally sells during the entire show, and that's just from Thursday, which is basically like a early preview night. It's only open for 3 or 4 hours. He sold twice the amount of an entire show just in that 3 to 4 hour period on the Thursday. On the Friday, he did the exact same thing. Also said he sold double the amount that he normally sells for the entire show. And so I obviously asked, what the heck is going on? That sounds incredible, and congratulations to you. And what do you think is the reason why he thinks this is happening? I'll give you a couple seconds here. And if you guessed repackers, you are correct. That is what this dealer thinks. He says that he sells some of his cards to a repacker, and he basically has an allotment of his cards that he knows this guy's going to come around and he sells them to them. But it seems that repackers are buying more of the inventory overall, and as a result, they buy up all the good stuff on the Thursday. And that means there's less of the prime or good stuff, the good cards, the prime inventory, whatever you want to call it. There's less of that available, and so as a result, people who are attending the show as regular Joes, there's no more of that prime inventory, so they buy some of the secondary, not as prime inventory, whatever you want to call it. They're buying that, so it has this downstream impact of all the good stuff's been taken by the repackers on the very first day. When the regular Joe Schmo walks in, there's none of the good stuff, so then they want to buy something. They don't want to seem like they came to a card show and didn't do anything, so then they buy some of the lower downstream cards, the secondary market, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Like, I'm calling here subprime inventory. And so as a result, that's why my dealer friend here, he has some of that stuff that he sells to repackers, but he has a lot more of the subprime inventory. He's saying he sold a ton of that. And so that's the feedback that we got from my first dealer friend here. And I think that does reflect a lot of the feedback that other dealers from other shows are mentioning as well. You hear that a lot from Neo Cards and Comics on his channel. So it's interesting that the repacker phenomenon is not just on the south side of the border. It also comes up north to Canada, where I am. So I thought that was interesting. I wasn't expecting that, to be totally honest. And I should note, my dealer friend here, dealer number one, all of his stuff is basketball. So if you think it's like a hockey thing, it is not, at least for dealer number one. It is not a hockey thing at all. It's basketball. So it's interesting that repackers have come north of the border here. Dealer number two, less comments from him, but he basically says if you're priced competitively, you're making great sales, and that's what he did. And he said he's moving a ton of stuff. He's got some regular customers that come by to his booth, and he sold a fair bit, and he was quite happy. And then dealer number three said he was buying cards, he was selling cards. People were coming up to his booth and selling, multiples of cards, or half of a set that he had that was like a higher end set. And he was also buying stuff, and things were moving. And I looked at his showcase, and there was a showcase that was half empty. And he's like, yeah, things are moving. So, that's why you can never judge a card show by the attendees or the number of people attending the show, because it's not the quantity of people, it's the quality of the sales. And so that's what I heard from dealers on the Thursday and Friday night. The other thing from the expo is there were a lot of influencers and hobby personalities from the US that came over the border. And whatever you want to call these people, there was a ton of them. So there were some of what I'm going to call the older generation collector influencers. So there's Leighton Sheldon from Just Collect, who I had a nice conversation with at Jeremy Lee's networking event that he hosts every expo, and I had a great chat with him. I was also very distracted by the Sixers game that was on in the background. I just kind of sat there and watched the game the entire time, didn't do too much. I heard baseball card collector, investor, dealer, Chris Sewell's was there, Ultimate Pastime was there. So there was that generation, and like people in like their 40s that were there as well. But there were a lot of the YouTube younger flipper influencer types there. You can see the list there. And I actually met with Roth Cards. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But there were quite a few of these younger influencers there, and it does seem like the expo is leaning more into that. Whether that's good or bad, I'll leave that for you to make your own judgment on that. There was also one person named Dr. Collectible there. I'd like to think that I'm somewhat knowledgeable of people in the hobby and well-known people in the hobby. I have no idea who this guy is, so maybe that's on me. But I looked at his Instagram page. I don't know what this guy does. And it turns out I wasn't the only one, because when I was talking to one of the dealers, and this dealer also was very familiar with people in the hobby influencer space and the different personalities involved, his exact quote was, "What does he do exactly?" And so if you guys can help me out, it's might be my own ignorance, but I don't know what he does. What does this guy do? I don't know. What am I missing here? So feel free to let me know in the comments, like, who is this guy and what does he do? Because I really am unsure. And so that's the end of the personalities of the people who were there. The last thing that happened is I made a deal with a hobby influencer. So I was walking around at the trade night on Friday, run by Canada Sportscards, and it was very convenient. It was right off of the show floor in one of the side rooms, so it was very convenient. Once you're done, you just walk into the room, you can set up shop. And I was walking around for probably an hour and a half or so, maybe even 2 hours. I didn't actually break out my own card, because in looking at the room, a lot of the stuff didn't really match what I had. You can see I have basketball. A lot of people there had hockey, and my stuff was slightly higher end. I wouldn't say fully higher end, but this card here is a multi-$1,000 card. I'll just leave it at that. And there wasn't a lot of that, so I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to bother breaking out my stuff, because it's like, I just don't want it. I'd rather go around hunting for cards and walking the rows of tables. So that's what I did. And then finally, I walked so often, and I talked to a few people that I knew, and got to meet Rocco. Shout out to you, Rocco, and a fellow named Alex, who was a Jokic fan. So I sat down with him. We had a good chat, and it just goes to show that if you like Jokic and you like Embiid, those two people, they don't have to be enemies in the wild. It's okay for them to be friends. Anyways. Finally, my feet got tired, so I needed to sit down. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to sit down, I might as well open up my box and put my cards out. So this is at 9 o'clock. The trade night started around 7. So this is 2 hours in. And I literally put out like maybe 5 cards. And then there was someone already there looking at my cards. And I looked up, and it was Josh from Roth Cards looking at it. And I'm like, oh, hey, okay. And so he looked at this card in particular. And I hadn't even brought out all of my cards out of the box yet. He was already looking at it. It was literally 30 seconds I brought it out. He was already at my table. And so we came to an agreement. I sold this card to him. It's a 2007 Topps Chrome Kobe Bryant X-Fractor numbered out of 50. It's an absolutely beautiful card, especially with the X-Fractor. This picture here, I was trying to take a picture of afterwards, and I said, you know what? It doesn't make sense for me to do this. Josh had his own photographer there. They literally do this for a living. So I'm like, hey, can you just take a picture for me with your fancy equipment and like whatever it is that you do to make cards look good, and just like text it to me? And so they did that. So it's actually, this picture that I have here is actually from Josh and Alan. So thanks to them. So that was a deal. And so Josh posted it on Instagram, and I also posted it, and I got a few follows out of it on IG. And that was the end of my Expo experience, or so I thought, because after this was posted, things got weird. Things got really weird, and we're going to talk about that in my next video, because my DMs got real weird after that deal with Josh. Has nothing to do with Josh, just to be clear. It has nothing to do with him, but Yeah, we're going to talk about that. I actually had to show the DMs to my wife to make sure that I wasn't imagining things and that this was weird. She's like, "Oh yeah, this is weird." So we're going to talk about that next time. Let me know your thoughts and comments on this video, the takeaways from the expo. If you heard anything from the expo about the experience there, how things were how things were going for dealers, would love to hear thoughts and comments. Thank you as always for listening and watching, and I'll talk to you all next time about how things get weird. Cheers.